Hey, amazing viewers! Before we go into this riveting narrative, drop your location in the comments below. We love connecting with you all around the world. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. Let's hit 10,000 subscribers this month together. Your support means everything. The reflection that wasn't hers. I never thought I'd be telling this story. I wish I could say it was just a nightmare, a twisted trick of the mind. But I saw it happen. I was there. And I promise you, every word I speak is the truth. It all started with a reflection. It was an ordinary Thursday morning. Emily Dawson was getting her daughter, Sophie, ready for school. I remember watching from my kitchen window as Emily tied Sophie's little pink sneakers. The 7-year-old giggled, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she wriggled excitedly. "Mommy, faster. We're gonna be late." Emily chuckled, pulling the laces tight before standing up. All right. You're all set." She smoothed Sophie's tiny backpack, adjusting the straps over her shoulders, then turned to look at herself in the hall mirror. That's when she froze. I couldn't see what she was staring at, but I saw the way her fingers tensed, how her breath hitched in her throat. It was just a mirror, wasn't it? Just a reflection. But something was wrong. I saw her hands trembling as she reached toward the glass, and then her reflection didn't move with her. Emily gasped, stumbling back, nearly knocking over a coat rack. Sophie blinked up at her, confused. "Mommy." But Emily didn't answer. I watched as she raised a shaking hand, waving at the mirror. The reflection stood still, staring back with the exact same face, same eyes, but not the same soul. Then, ever so slowly, the reflection tilted its head. I couldn't hear what she whispered, but I saw the fear in Emily's eyes. She grabbed Sophie's wrist, yanking her toward the door. "We're leaving. Now." Sophie whined. "But my cereal." Emily didn't let her finish. She was already dragging her out the door, her breath coming in rapid gasps. She locked the door behind her so fast her keys nearly slipped from her grip. And that's when she turned her head and screamed. Because standing at the end of the driveway, just by the sidewalk, was another Emily. The woman who wasn't her. It wasn't just a resemblance. It wasn't like running into a twin you never knew you had. No, this thing was her. Same height, same brown eyes, same freckles dotting her cheeks. She even had the same small scar on her left eyebrow. The one Emily had gotten when she fell off her bike as a kid. But the way she stood, it was off. Too still, too focused, too predatory. I could see Emily's body locking up. For a second, she just stood there, gripping Sophie's wrist, barely breathing. Then the woman who looked exactly like her smiled. And it was wrong. I mean, it looked normal enough. But I'd lived next door to Emily for years. I've seen her smile in the most genuine moments, laughing over coffee, cheering for Sophie at school plays. That smile had always been warm, kind. Not this one. This smile was calculated, controlled. Like someone had studied how to mimic emotion, but didn't quite understand it. And then she spoke. "Emily, don't be afraid," she said, in Emily's exact voice. "I just came for what's mine." I don't know if it was adrenaline or instinct, but Emily suddenly snapped out of her frozen fear. She yanked Sophie into her arms and bolted. No hesitation, no second guessing. She ran. And I swear to God, as she took off down the sidewalk, the other Emily didn't chase her. She just stood there, tilting her head again, watching, smiling. And then, as calmly as if she were just stepping inside for a cup of tea, she walked into Emily's house. The nightmare begins. I knew then I had to do something. I threw on my jacket, grabbed my phone, and ran after Emily. I found her 3 blocks away, crouched behind a gas station, holding Sophie close like her life depended on it. When she saw me, she burst into tears. "It's not me," she gasped. "That thing. It's not me." I knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders. "Emily, Listen to me. I saw her too. She walked into your house. She thinks she belongs there." Emily's breath hitched. She said she came for what's hers. We both looked at Sophie. The little girl whimpered, pressing into her mother's chest. "Mommy, I don't like this game," she whispered. Emily clutched her tighter, kissing her forehead. "It's not a game, P." I could see the war in Emily's eyes, the confusion, the terror, but most of all, the fierce determination. That was her daughter, and she wasn't going to let anything take her away. Then something shattered in the distance. We turned in unison. The gas station window. A spiderweb crack had split through the glass, and in the reflection, she was there, standing behind us, smiling. Nowhere left to run. Have you ever felt the kind of fear that grits your bones and freezes your soul? The kind that tells you, run now or you won't live to see tomorrow. That's what I saw in Emily's eyes that night. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She just grabbed Sophie and ran. And I ran with her. I don't know why I didn't just call the cops right away. Maybe because some part of me knew. What would I even tell them? That my neighbor had a doppelganger trying to take over her life. That we saw her reflection move on its own, and now she was hunting her own child. Yeah, I can just imagine how that 911 call would go. So instead, I did the only thing I could. I ran beside her, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white, my breath coming in gasps as we darted through the dimly lit streets. Behind us, we heard it. The crunch of footsteps. Not running, just walking. Steady, patient, like she knew we had nowhere to go. The stranger at the motel. By the time we reached the highway, Emily was shaking so badly she nearly dropped Sophie. I flagged down a cab, and we barely spoke a word as the driver took us to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. We paid cash. No credit cards. No names. Emily didn't even turn the lights on when we got into the tiny room, just locked the door, bolted it, and shoved a chair against the handle. Sophie was curled up on the bed, hugging her knees, her tiny fingers gripping Emily's sleeve like she was afraid she'd vanish if she let go. I sat down beside them, my pulse still pounding in my ears. "Emily," I whispered. She looked up at me, her face pale and tight with exhaustion. "I don't understand," she murmured. "She has my voice, my face, even my..." Her breath hitched. "My memories." That's when it hit me. She wasn't just copying Emily's face. She was copying her entire life. I don't know how I knew. It was just this terrible feeling in my gut, like something had already been decided, and we were just playing catch-up. And then, a knock at the door. 3 soft taps. We all froze. Sophie whimpered, burying her face in Emily's arm. My fingers hovered over my phone, ready to call the police, finally ready to risk sounding like a lunatic. Emily pressed a trembling finger to her lips, signaling for silence. Then she moved toward the door, slowly, carefully, until she was standing right beside it. The knock came again. 3 soft taps. She sucked in a breath and forced her voice to stay steady. "Who's there?" Silence. And then, a whisper. "Emily." My blood ran cold. It wasn't the doppelganger's voice. It was a man's voice. Emily's face contorted with confusion. She hesitated, then peeked through the peephole. I saw her body tense. "What?" I whispered. "Who is it?" She turned to me, her expression unreadable. "It's..." Another knock. This time, more urgent. "Emily, please, I need to talk to you." Emily hesitated only a second longer before she unbolted the door and cracked it open. A man in his 40s stood outside. His eyes were wild, like someone who hadn't slept in days. His clothes were wrinkled, his beard unkempt, but it wasn't his appearance that made my stomach drop. It was the way he looked at Emily. Like he already knew her, like he'd been expecting her. His voice was desperate. "You have to listen to me. You're not safe." Emily tightened her grip on the door. "Who are you?" The man swallowed hard. Then, almost too quietly for me to hear, "I lost my wife to one of them." What the doppelgangers want. I don't know how long we sat in that motel room, listening to the man's story. His name was David. He had a wife. A normal life. Until one day, he came home, and his wife wasn't his wife anymore. She looked like her. She talked like her. She even remembered the trip we took to Hawaii 5 years ago. His voice cracked, but it wasn't her. I knew it. He tried to prove it, had her take a blood test, a fingerprint scan. Hell, he even tried catching her off guard with questions no one else could answer. But she passed every single one. And yet, his real wife was gone. She had just vanished. And now, he murmured, staring at Emily, "It's happening to you." Emily swallowed hard. But why? What do they want? David's expression darkened. They don't just want to take your place. He glanced at Sophie. They want something bigger. Emily pulled her daughter closer, her arms protective. "No, she's my child." David exhaled shakily. "That's what I thought too." A long silence settled between us. Then he stood up, glancing toward the window. "If she's already here," he said, "then we don't have much time." Emily stiffened. "Time for what?" He turned back to us, eyes hollow. "To stop her, the choice." That night, we didn't sleep. David laid out a plan, one that sounded just as insane as everything else that had happened. "We can't just run," he explained. "That only makes them more confident. They feed on fear, on doubt. You have to face her." Emily shook her head violently. "You want me to go back? To confront her?" David's jaw clenched. "You have to." A chill crept up my spine. Because deep down, I knew he was right. If we kept running, we'd never be safe. Not really. But if Emily could stand up to her doppelganger, if she could prove, beyond any doubt, that she was the real one, maybe we had a chance. The last warning. At 3 a.m., David left to check the area, to make sure we weren't being followed. He never came back. At 3:45 a.m., I heard the knocking again. 3 soft taps. Emily and I held our breath. We knew who it was. Slowly, carefully, I stepped toward the window and peeked through the curtain. My heart nearly stopped. There she was, Emily's doppelganger, but she wasn't alone. She was holding David's phone, and she was smiling. "Emily," she whispered through the door. And this time, her voice was almost sad, like she already knew how this would end. The thing that wore her face. If you've ever been trapped in absolute silence, with your heart pounding in your ears, you'll know the feeling we had that night. The motel room was so still I could hear Emily's shaky breath. I could hear Sophie's tiny heartbeat pressed against her mother's chest. I could hear the soft drip, drip, drip of a leaky sink faucet. And then, I heard her. Through the door, in the same voice as Emily, with the same calm patience she had before. "Emily," she whispered again. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a threat. It was worse. It was an invitation. And when I looked at Emily, I saw something I'd never seen in her before. She was breaking. Her hands gripped Sophie so tightly the little girl whimpered. Her whole body was shaking, her breath coming out ragged and uneven. And I realized something terrifying. She was listening to the voice. "Mommy," Sophie whispered. "Why does she sound like you?" Emily clenched her jaw, her entire body trembling. "I don't know, baby," she rasped. "I don't know." And then, the doorknob turned. "She wants in." The lock held, but it didn't matter. The doppelganger wasn't in a hurry. She just stood there, twisting the knob back and forth, like she was testing it, like she was waiting for Emily to give in. I grabbed my phone and texted David. "Where are you?" "She's here." No answer. I tried again. "David, pick up. We need you." Nothing. I felt the dread creep up my spine. We were on our own. Then, the doppelganger spoke again. "I just want to talk," she cooed, her voice disturbingly soft. "You don't have to be afraid." Emily squeezed her eyes shut. I saw her fingers twitch, her breathing change. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. She was about to open the door. And if she did, if she saw her doppelganger face to face, it would be over. I lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. "No." Emily gasped, as if waking from a trance. Her eyes snapped to mine, wild, confused, scared. I just... She cut herself off, shaking her head hard, like she was trying to clear it. That's when I understood. The thing outside wasn't just a copy. It was pulling her in. The other side of the mirror. I don't know how long we sat there, waiting, frozen. And then, the doppelganger's voice changed. She wasn't whispering anymore. She was mocking. "Oh, Emily," she sighed. "Why do you fight so hard? Haven't you figured it out?" I could almost see her smirking through the door. "You don't belong here." I felt Emily stiffen beside me. "Don't listen," I whispered. But it was too late. Emily's breathing hitched. Her hands trembled. Because some part of her, some dark, buried part, believed it. I grabbed her shoulders. "Emily, look at me. Look at me." She did, and in that moment I saw her. The real Emily. A mother, a fighter, someone who had been beaten down by life, but had never let it steal her soul. And that's when it hit me. That's what the doppelganger wanted. It wasn't just about taking her place. It was about breaking her spirit, making her give up. Because the second she did, she would become the reflection, and the doppelganger would become real. The first trick fails. Emily sucked in a breath. Then, finally, she moved away from the door. The second she did, the doppelganger went silent. Then, slowly, she let out a soft laugh, a low, eerie chuckle that sent ice down my spine. "That's all right," she said. "You'll open the doors soon enough." Then the footsteps retreated. And just like that, she was gone. For the first time in what felt like hours, we could breathe again. Sophie was still trembling in Emily's arms, her tiny hands clutching at her mother's hoodie like a lifeline. I glanced at Emily. "Are you okay?" Her hands were still shaking, but she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I am." And I believed her. Because something had changed. She wasn't just running anymore. She was fighting. David's last message. At sunrise, we packed our things and left the motel. We didn't know where we were going. We just knew we couldn't stay. I checked my phone again. Still no response from David. But then, just as we got into the car, my phone vibrated. A message from David. I felt a rush of relief. Until I read it. "She's not me." The blood drained from my face. I texted back. "David, where are you?" The typing bubbles appeared. Then disappeared. Then, finally, the only way to win is not to play. I had no idea what that meant, but I didn't have time to figure it out. Because in the rearview mirror, I saw her, standing on the sidewalk, watching, smiling. She wasn't trying to get in the car. She wasn't chasing us. She was waiting. Like she already knew what was coming next. The final warning. That afternoon, we arrived at a safe house David had told us about before he vanished. It was an abandoned cabin, deep in the woods, miles from the nearest road. Emily held Sophie close, her eyes darting around as we stepped inside. "Do you think she followed us?" I hesitated. "I don't know. We checked every window, every door, every corner. There was no one there. And for the first time in days, we allowed ourselves to hope. Maybe we had escaped. Maybe we had won. Maybe." Then Sophie spoke. "Mommy." Emily turned. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sophie frowned, confused. "I thought you were in the bathroom." Emily stiffened. "I wasn't. A cold, suffocating silence filled the cabin. Then, from the hallway, the sound of running water. Emily's face drained of color, because there was only one mirror in this house, and it was in the bathroom. Her voice came out in a whisper. "She's already inside. The other one inside." Have you ever stepped into a room and immediately felt that you weren't alone? Like the air itself had shifted, like the walls knew something you didn't. That's what it was like in that cabin. The moment Sophie whispered, "I thought you were in the bathroom," a chill ran down my spine. We hadn't seen the doppelganger follow us. We had checked the doors, the windows, but she was inside. Emily and I locked eyes. And then, a sound. Drip, drip, drip. The bathroom faucet, running, even though we hadn't used it. Sophie whimpered, clinging to her mother's side. "Mommy." Emily's breath came fast and shallow. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Stay behind me." She moved toward the hallway. Slow, careful, deliberate. I followed, my pulse hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. With every step, the air grew heavier. The old wooden floor creaked beneath us. The dim yellow light flickered. And then, Emily reached the bathroom door. It was slightly open, just wide enough to see her reflection in the mirror. Only, it wasn't moving. The thing in the mirror. The real Emily stood frozen at the threshold. The Emily in the mirror. She stood perfectly still, facing the sink, her hands resting lightly on the counter, like she was waiting. The running water trickled down the drain, steady and unbroken. Emily's hand hovered over the doorknob. Her breath was shaky. I wanted to stop her, to tell her to run, but I couldn't, because deep down I knew. This was a test, a trick, a trap, and if Emily ran now, she would lose. Facing herself, I could barely breathe as Emily slowly stepped inside. The reflection stayed still. Emily moved closer. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" The other Emily tilted her head. And then she spoke. "I knew." The voice was identical, perfectly matched, but there was something hollow in it. Something wrong. Emily's hands curled into fists. "No," she whispered. "You're not." The reflection smiled. And then it moved. Not like a normal person would move. Not smoothly. It glitched, like a broken film reel, jumping frames in a way the human eye couldn't quite process. Emily stumbled back. "What do you want?" The reflection tilted its head further. "You know what I want." It flicked its gaze toward the hallway, toward Sophie. Emily went still. Then, faster than I could react, she lunged forward and slammed the mirror cabinet shut. For a second, I thought she had done it. But then, the cabinet swung back open, and the reflection wasn't in the mirror anymore. It was behind her. The switch, I saw it happen in a split second. One moment, Emily was standing there, staring at the mirror. The next, she was on the floor. I don't even know how she fell. She just collapsed, like something had sucked the life out of her. The reflection, the thing wearing her face, stood over her, smiling. Emily gasped for breath, her body trembling. Sophie screamed. And that's when I knew. The doppelganger was taking her place. She had to fight. She had to resist. I dropped to my knees, grabbing her hand. "Emily, listen to me. Don't let her take you." Emily's fingers twitched. Her breath came in ragged gasps. And then, her lips moved. At first, no sound came out. Then, a whisper. "Sophie." She was still in there. She hadn't let go. Not yet. The doppelganger crouched beside her, stroking Emily's hair like a mother comforting a child. "You don't have to fight," she whispered. "You're tired, aren't you?" Emily clenched her jaw. Her body shook. Then, suddenly, she flipped over and slammed her fist into the doppelganger's face. The thing recoiled, a look of pure shock flashing across its stolen features. And then, It glitched again. Its face twisted. Its smile broke. Emily scrambled backward, her chest rising and falling with panic. She reached out, grabbing Sophie, pulling her close. The doppelganger shuddered, and for the first time, it looked afraid. Because Emily hadn't broken. She had fought back. And that wasn't supposed to happen. The final stand. The air in the cabin shifted. The lights flickered wildly. The walls creaked. And the doppelganger let out a sound I'll never forget. A scream, high-pitched, unnatural, filled with rage. It lunged, but Emily was faster. She grabbed the mirror and flipped it. The reflection shattered, and the doppelganger let out a strangled, distorted shriek. It glitched violently, its body flickering like a corrupted image on a screen, until suddenly, it wasn't there anymore. Just gone. Like it had never existed. And Emily. She was still here. Still real. Still herself. She had won. The aftermath. We left the cabin before the sun rose. None of us spoke as we drove away. We didn't need to. Emily held Sophie close the entire ride, whispering to her, stroking her hair, promising her she was safe. And for the first time in days, I believed her. Because she had fought for herself, for her child, for her life. And in the end, she had chosen to stay. The woman who chose to stay. Have you ever felt like you're being watched? Not the casual glance of a stranger passing by. Not the eerie sensation of an empty house at night. I mean really watched. Like something knows you better than you know yourself. Like it's waiting for you to slip. That's how Emily felt for weeks after we left the cabin. She won the fight that night. But deep down, she knew it wasn't over. The life that wasn't hers. For a while, things seemed normal again. She moved in with me for a while. She kept Sophie close at all times. She even started going to therapy. But there were little things. Things she couldn't explain. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like someone had just left the room. She'd find the mirror in the hallway facing the wrong direction. And sometimes, just for a split second, she'd see herself in a reflection, smiling when she wasn't. And one morning, she found a note, folded neatly on the kitchen table. It was written in her own handwriting. You shouldn't have won. The other choice. That's when she realized. The doppelganger hadn't just wanted to take her place. It had wanted her to choose to leave. It had wanted her to break. But she didn't. And now, there was something unfinished. Something wrong. Like the universe itself didn't know what to do with her. As if she wasn't supposed to be here anymore. The final reflection. One evening, I found her sitting in front of the mirror, staring. Her expression was unreadable. I hesitated. Emily. She didn't look at me. What if I wasn't supposed to come back? A chill ran down my spine. Don't say that. She exhaled shakily. She was so sure I'd give in. So sure I'd let go. And when I didn't, she finally turned to me. She looked afraid. My stomach twisted. What if that means I don't belong here anymore? She whispered. I grabbed her hands. Emily, listen to me. You are here. You are real. You chose to stay. Her breath hitched. And then, she nodded. She reached forward, slow, hesitant, until her fingertips touched the mirror. This time, her reflection moved with her. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled. A real, genuine, human smile. Because she had won. And this life was hers to keep. The woman who survived. The nightmares never fully stopped. But Emily learned to live with them. She stopped looking over her shoulder. She stopped waiting for the thing in the mirror to return. She stopped questioning whether she belonged. Because she did. She chose this life. And no one, not even her reflection, could take it away from her. But then, 1 year later, she called me in the middle of the night. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I need you to come over, she said. I frowned. Why? She took a deep breath. Then, in a whisper, because I just tucked Sophie into bed, my stomach dropped. Okay. Emily's voice trembled. But when I went back to the hallway, I could hear her breathing hard now. I saw her. A pause. The other Sophie. My blood ran cold. She was standing in front of the mirror, Emily murmured, smiling. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.